Hello, just wanted to make a short video here addressing a few things from the reading um, from the Pengrazy textbook. And some of the things I'm going to talk about weren't in the reading. I'm definitely not going to address everything that was in the chapter. But I did want to talk just a little bit about student learning and physical education and some things that I think I guess that I wanted to re-emphasize from the reading, and maybe a few things that weren't necessarily addressed too much in that chapter either. Um, so I'm just going to start with this. I think one thing that's really important when you think about student learning as a physical education teacher is to be active as a physical education teacher and connected to the students. And the chapter did talk a little bit about that, but I just wanted to expand on that a little bit. I think it's super important for a physical education teacher um, to really be enthusiastic about what they're doing. Physical education is about movement, it's about being active. And a PE teacher that just sits there and kind of acts ho hum about it is really not going to motivate students. I think it's important for any teacher to consider themselves to be a motivator, but for PE, I think it's particularly important from a physical perspective that you move as a PE teacher. Um, I'll give you an example of how that was really impressed on me when I was just starting out as a teacher. Actually, when I was student teaching, I had a cooperating teacher who was a pretty good PE teacher, but at the school he was at, there was a shop teacher who actually was assigned to teach some PE classes. And one day he said to me, "I'd like you take you over here to show you how not to teach PE." And basically, what we did is we went and watched this guy teach his PE class. And what he did is he sat on the top row of the bleachers, and it was one of these old gyms, kind of like if you've ever watched the movie Hoosiers, but it had the stage on one side and the built-in bleachers on the other. And he'd go to the top row of those bleachers and sit there with his whistle, and he taught the whole PE class from up there on that top bleacher. And he would just blow the whistle and yell at the kids, and the kids weren't very cooperative, and it really made an impression on me. And basically, the point he was making is that if you're going to be a PE teacher and you're going to motivate your students, you can't really do it like that. You can't just sit there and be lazy and yell at them. Um, Another thing that I think is important to consider is that how you talk to students really matters, how you communicate to them. Be assertive and clear in your communication. I think that's really important in physical education. It can be easy for students to get confused about what you want them to do. Giving a lot of feedback and encouragement. I've been a coach for many years, and I think that all coaches know the importance of giving their athletes encouragement. It's really not any different in physical education. You, the more as a PE teacher you give positive reinforcement to your students, the less you're going to have to give negative reinforcement. And the more feedback you can give, the better. So I think a really good PE teacher is constantly talking in class and constantly giving feedback. And that's another thing to consider when it comes to student learning and physical education. They're going to learn better if you give them more feedback, better feedback, and a lot of encouragement. Another factor I think with student learning that's really important to consider in physical education is that in a given PE class, it is very likely that you're going to have a huge range of ability. Um, and I mean that in the sense of students' ability to learn motor skills and also their level of already knowing motor skills. And when you get into secondary PE, it can be even more true, especially middle school, when kids are really going through puberty and that type of development where their bodies are changing. They can really have a wide range. In one classroom, you could have like a 4 or 5 year difference in where kids are at developmentally, and some kids are naturally better at it also. So that can really be pronounced. So it's really important that when you think about student learning, you consider those wide ranges and you design your teaching in a way that students with different abilities can have some success. Um, that that kind of leads me also to the next one. Um, well, actually, I also wanted to say that that can be really a motivating factor, um, also for your students, and a demotivating factor if they are required to um, a student who is not very proficient physically or motor learning wise, and they are required to do the same thing in class or thrown into a game with students who are way above them. That's going to be a huge demotivator, and it can actually for the students who have more skills also, because a lot of times they actually, don't have as much fun if they're trying to compete against somebody who has way less skill. um, and so those are things to consider. And it's also important when you consider how you design your lessons too, that if you do have competitive situations, that you have students who have similar ability levels, and also that you make sure that you provide students with the opportunity to develop their skill. I think that's essential, it, especially if you're going to do activities that require a lot of skills, and most team sports do. And since a lot of people really like team sports and physical education, you really can't overlook the skill part of it, because students aren't going to be very motivated to do a sport if they can't perform the skills. Um, Another area that I think is really important for student learning and physical education is really student input. And your text talked a little bit about that, but um, I think it's an essential component if you're really going to have a physical education program that's focused on learning. Students are much more motivated if they're doing activities that they want to do. The only way you can really know that is if you get input from them. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can just talk with them about what kind of activities they want to do. You can do surveys. Another great way to do it is to give them the choice of picking an activity that takes a little bit more organization and maybe even some help in the classroom. But those are just some examples. Um, it's very rare in my experience in a high school PE class where all of the students are super motivated to do team sports. I have been in a few high schools where that's the case. They're usually like more rural schools where the kids are pretty much all the same. And they're like farm kids, not to stereotype, but it's kind of the truth. And they all have experience with team sports. In those types of environments, I have seen PE classes where they pretty much do all team sports and all the kids participate and seem to like it, but it's very rare. Most of the high school PE classes I go to, if all they're doing is team sports, at least 25 to 50% of the kids um, look unmotivated and really aren't having that much fun. And so that's to me a significant issue to consider with student learning, is what's the demographics of the students you teach? What kind of activities are they going to like to do? How can you design your physical education program in a way that they're going to feel like they have some investment in it and that they're going to want to do it? Um, to be honest with you, I think most high school PE students would rather just do physical fitness or workout, CrossFit types of things than a team sport if they don't feel like they're very proficient with the skills. And if they realize that there's going to be benefits from doing it. But again, my point is the best way to know is to give the students input, and then they have ownership of it also. And individualizing the programs is a great way to do that also. If it's more fitness based, that's easier to do. But you definitely could individualize programs with different sports, racket sports, team sports. And we'll look at some ways in which you can make team sports maybe a little bit more interesting to students. That's one of the things that we're going to do next week. So yeah, I'll sign off there then. That's a long enough video.